Well, good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on reimbursement for resource providers. My name is Angela Koppel. I'm the facilitator for the webinar. Our presenter today is Jack Jowett, and we're assisted today by staff member Jennifer Perkins.
Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be with you today to present this webinar for resource providers. Now, what do we mean by resource provider? Well, a resource provider is either a state agency, a unit of local government, or other entity that deploys personnel, equipment, or other assets through the emergency management agency of one Emac member state to the emergency management agency of another Emac member state. Whether it be extreme cost overruns due to poor cost estimating, the lack of supporting documentation for expenses incurred, or cash flow problems in the requesting state, issues relating to financial reimbursement are often the most contentious matters states face in connection with the provision or receipt of mutual aid under the compact. It has been demonstrated that the more resource providers understand about the Emac process in general, and the better prepared they are to develop good cost estimates and keep good cost documentation, the more likely it is that reimbursement will not be a major issue. This webinar is designed to educate you on how the reimbursement process is designed to work and to better prepare you, the resource provider, to make the process work for you. The topics we will cover today are the basis for reimbursement, that's the statutory basis, principles of reimbursement, member state and resource provider responsibilities, cost eligibility, how the reimbursement process is designed to work, and what a properly prepared reimbursement package consists of. And at the end, of course, we'll do a summary. When it was ratified by the Congress in 1996, the 13 Articles of Agreement in the Emergency Management Assistance Compact became Public Law 104-321. When each member state took necessary legislative steps to adopt the compact, the 13 Articles of Agreement became law in each member state. The Articles of Agreement are the underlying principles of the compact and are the basis for the Emac operational procedures. The legal basis for reimbursement of expenses incurred on a deployment under the compact are found in Article 9, which states in brief, any party state rendering aid shall be reimbursed for any loss or damage to or expense incurred in the operation of any equipment and the provision of any service. Article 9 also allows states to donate costs associated with equipment use, personal services, and other expenses incurred during a deployment. Where that has occurred, the donation of services has always been in connection with state-owned personnel or other assets. Nowhere in the Articles of Agreement does it state that reimbursement under the compact is predicated upon the requesting state first receiving compensation from insurance proceeds, Federal Emergency Management Agency, or any other source. It could not be clearer that it is the responsibility of the requesting state to pay those states that have provided assistance. The request for assistance, or Rec A, is the contractual basis for reimbursement. The Rec A is a three-part form which is executed by an authorized representative from both the requesting and assisting state emergency management agencies. Section 1 of the Rec A provides information on what is being requested, the mission to be performed, the amount of time the assistance will be needed, the initial staging area, and a point of contact for the mission. Section 2 of the Rec A is where the assisting state provides specifics on what assets it can offer, the period of time the assets can be made available, and the estimated costs associated with the deployment, including pre-deployment and post-deployment expenses. Section 3 of the Rec A, when signed by an authorized representative of the State Emergency Management Agency requesting the assistance, confirms acceptance of the offer made by the Emergency Management Agency of the state offering assistance. At this point, the Rec A constitutes a binding contract. A copy of the Rec A or a mission deployment order form is given to the resource provider prior to deployment. This is the resource provider's credential and validates the authenticity of the mission. As mentioned in the previous slide, the Rec A constitutes an assisting state's offer to perform the mission. provides details on the resources available and a total cost estimate to perform the mission. A resource provider intending to offer assistance through an Emac member state must be prepared to provide that state with the specific details on the assets being offered by the resource provider, as well as a reasonably good estimate of the cost associated with all aspects of the deployment. The resource provider's information is transposed by the assisting state into Section 2 of the Rec A. Section 2 is then signed by an authorized representative of the assisting state and is transmitted to the state requesting assistance for that state's consideration. The cost estimates may weigh heavily on the requesting state's decision on whether to accept an offer, and in the case of multiple offers being received, on which offer to accept. This is particularly the case in catastrophic events where cash flow could be a problem for the requesting state. If the cost estimate is poorly developed and expenses incurred in the actual deployment greatly exceed the estimate, it is likely that the resource provider will experience delays in being reimbursed as matters pertaining to the reimbursement claim are addressed. Resource providers must also be aware that a requesting state may receive several offers of assistance from which to choose, and that not every offer is accepted. There are some actions that resource providers are advised to take if they plan to make their personnel or resources available for an Emac deployment. The resource provider should coordinate with the assisting state emergency management agency on the development of procedures to offer assistance and the development of good cost estimates. Pre-planning will facilitate the process of gathering information and completing the Rec A. If the resource provider is a local government, it will need to negotiate a legal instrument, or MOU, with the state in order to be deployed as a state asset. Remember, the Emergency Management Assistance Compact is a state-to-state compact, and in order to deploy non-state assets, those assets must be made agents of the state. Other pre-planning actions resource providers should take include maintaining an inventory of available resources and capabilities, developing mission-ready packages with up-to-date personnel salary schedules and equipment cost estimates, and establishing procedures with the resource provider's local finance authority for coordination of both Emac deployments and the preparation of reimbursement claims. These actions will facilitate the process and ensure that critical resources are deployed and received in an expeditious manner. They will also ensure the expeditious preparation of the reimbursement claim and facilitate the reimbursement to the resource provider. To close out this portion of the webinar, I would like to reinforce one point. That is that a good cost estimate results in a good reimbursement package. Time spent at the front end of the process will pay off during the reimbursement phase. Now let's take a look at the principles of reimbursement. The reimbursement process is initiated when the mission is over and the resource provider's personnel and equipment are redeployed home. Expense vouchers are prepared and submitted to the resource provider, who in turn prepares and submits its claim for reimbursement to the assisting state that deployed the resource provider's assets. Principles of Emac reimbursement dictate the following. The assisting state audits the reimbursement package and pays the resource provider before submitting its reimbursement claim to the requesting state. The requesting state agrees to reimburse each assisting state for all eligible deployment and mission-related costs. Resource providers must understand that the reimbursement process varies from state to state. And as with any reimbursement process, claims must be well documented and follow Emac and jurisdictional procedures. To find out how the reimbursement process works in your state, you should contact your state emergency management agency. Article 3 of the Compact outlines state responsibilities as members of the Compact. Among these responsibilities is the need to inventory and set procedures for the interstate loan and delivery of human and material resources, together with the procedures for reimbursement or forgiveness. Member states that ask for assistance have as much of an expectation that they will receive aid as those that provide assistance expect to be reimbursed. unless the assisting state does not wish to be reimbursed. As it pertains to the reimbursement process, both requesting and assisting states have common responsibilities under the compact. They are to develop plans and procedures for the preparation of and submittal of claims for reimbursement, and to train authorized representatives, designated contacts, finance administrative staff, resource providers, and deployable personnel on the reimbursement process, documentation requirements, and cost eligibility. In addition, assisting and requesting states have specific responsibilities in connection with the Emac reimbursement process. They are as follows. Assisting states collect and audit reimbursement claims from resource providers. They work with the resource providers to resolve problems with those claims. Finally, they submit those claims to the requesting state. The requesting states receive claims from the assisting states, audit those claims and resolve problems with the assisting state, and finally they reimburse the assisting states. Resource providers, in addition to pre-planning activities covered early, should be prepared to keep copies of all documentation sent to the assisting state and fully audit the reimbursement package before sending it forward. Resource providers should have a full understanding of the Emac reimbursement process and how to prepare its claim. The assisting state provides guidance in this regard and can answer questions for the resource provider. Now let's look at the eligible categories into which costs may fall. They are personnel, travel, equipment, commodities, and other. Eligible costs within the personnel category include salary, which includes regular time, overtime, and fringe benefits. Salaries are calculated at the regular rate used by the resource provider. An authorized individual must sign timesheets, payroll documents, and work records. Personnel backfill costs are ineligible unless specifically approved by both parties in the Rec A. Eligible costs in travel category include airfare, ground transportation, which would include cab fare, rental vehicle, personal vehicle mileage, lodging, unless lodging is provided in a base camp, or if individuals are deployed into an area that has primitive conditions, and meals that are not provided by the requesting state or some other entity in the state. Eligible costs within the equipment category include maintenance and operating costs necessary to operate machinery required for the mission. The resource provider's forces must keep daily log sheets to document the hours that the equipment was in use. The commodity category includes consumables, supplies, and materials which are used for the mission. Any commodities or purchases should be described in the Rec A and agreed to by both parties. Any commodities needed during the mission deployment should first be approved by the requesting state. In the other category, we have repair or replacement costs of equipment damaged during the deployment, minus any insurance proceeds. Costs for decontamination or cleaning of equipment used during the deployment. Costs of purchasing and transporting supplies by the assisting state as approved in the Rec A. Maintenance or repair of equipment to pre-disaster condition. And replacement costs of damaged or destroyed items. Any unexpected costs, particularly costs that greatly exceed the initial cost estimate, will require an amendment to the Rec A. If needed, resource providers should contact the assisting state emergency management agency for guidance on how to amend the Rec A. Ineligible costs are those expenses that are personal in nature or which are not related to the mission being performed. They include replacement of items prior to deployment, costs of personal use items such as alcohol, tobacco, toiletries, costs incurred by a self-deployed entity, and costs for items not specified or indicated on the Rec A. The next series of slides portrays the reimbursement process and the manner in which it was designed to work. When personnel return home from an Emac-related mission, they prepare and submit to their resource provider travel vouchers, timesheets, and receipts for any other purchases made. This is done in accordance with the resource provider's normal procedures and requirements. The personnel also assist the resource provider in compiling expense and documentation on the use of or damage to equipment, the purchase of commodities, and any approved contractual service arrangements that were necessary to support the mission performed. The resource provider, which may be a state agency, a unit of local government, or other entity, audits the individual's travel expenses, time and attendance records, and any other claimed expenses and pays the individual in accordance with local procedures. At this point, the deployed personnel are completed with their responsibilities under the Emac reimbursement process. In the next step, the resource provider and the assisting state emergency management agency that deployed the resource provider's assets coordinate on the preparation and submittal of the resource provider's claim. After auditing and paying all expenses relating to the Emac deployment, the resource provider prepares its reimbursement package and submits that reimbursement package to the assisting state. Guidance on the preparation of the claim is provided to the resource provider by the assisting state. This will include the standard Emac reimbursement procedures and any additional guidance required by the assisting state. The assisting state audits the resource provider's claim, resolving any questionable costs or other matters pertaining to the claim with the resource provider. Normally, once it completes its audit of the claim, the assisting state issues payment to the resource provider. At this point, the resource provider has completed its responsibilities under the Emac reimbursement process. An exception to the standard process can occur when an assisting state is unable to directly pay the claim submitted by the resource provider. In this instance, the assisting state will audit the resource provider's claim and forward it to the requesting state, asking the requesting state to issue payment for the claim to the assisting state. Once the requesting state issues payment to the assisting state will issue payment to the resource provider. Now let's take a look at what a reimbursement package consists of. Standard procedures have been established and standard forms developed to assist states and resource providers with the preparation of claims for reimbursement. This is the standard Emac Interstate reimbursement form, which is also known as the R2. This form is used by resource providers to summarize their claim for reimbursement. The assisting state uses a similar form to summarize the costs associated with the claims of resource providers it has reimbursed and for which the assisting state is seeking reimbursement from the requesting state. This form is the Emac Interstate reimbursement form, which is commonly referred to as the R1. These forms are very similar in that each asks the claimant, whether a resource provider or an assisting state, to summarize expenses being claimed by category of expense. The Emac forms R1 and R2 are available to member states on the Emac website and should be provided to the resource provider in a pre-deployment briefing. The Emac forms R1 and R2 also include information pertaining to the claimant as well as the event for which the expenses were incurred. Resource providers who complete the R2 would include the information shown highlighted in red. It includes a description of or identifier for the event, the date the R2 was completed, the name of the assisting state, the name of the resource provider and vendor number if applicable, and state and Emac mission numbers. You will note there is also a checkbox to indicate whether receipts and backup documentation are attached. Regardless of whether or not they are attached, at the time of submittal, a claim for reimbursement cannot be paid without a thorough audit of the resource provider's supporting documentation. Supporting documentation includes those types of records which prove and validate the expenses. As covered earlier in this webinar, supporting documentation would include but not be limited to timesheets, work records which indicate the number of hours worked per day, payroll documents, travel expense reports and vouchers, and warrants and checks. A properly prepared resource provider reimbursement claim package should include the following: a copy of the fully executed Rec A or mission order, a completed Emac Form R2, one per Rec A or mission, all supporting documentation, and a cover letter transmitting the package on the resource provider's letterhead. A properly prepared assisting state reimbursement claim package should include the following: copies of all Form R2s from resource providers with the Rec A and supporting documentation for each, an Emac Form R1 reflecting the total cost of all resource provider claims, and a cover letter on assisting state letterhead. Now let me summarize what we covered today. 1, the reimbursement process begins with the Rec A when assistance is scoped out and cost estimates are developed. 2, requesting states, assisting states, and resource providers all have responsibilities that are essential to an effective reimbursement process. 3, states and resource providers should pre-plan for Emac deployments, and that pre-planning should include the reimbursement process. 4, deployed personnel should be aware of their responsibilities to account for expenses. And finally, reimbursement is facilitated by well-documented reimbursement packages. If all principals involved in an Emac deployment, the requesting state, the assisting state, and the resource provider understand and properly execute their responsibilities under the Emac process, the reimbursement process will work. This completes my presentation today. If there are any questions, Angela, I will entertain them at this time.
Okay, our first question is there a requirement for a federal declaration in order to receive reimbursement under Emac?
There is no requirement for a federal declaration. However, the state that is requesting assistance the governor of that state must have declared a disaster under state law.
Okay, our second question, do you have examples of eligible cost issues that a state may need to address during the reimbursement process, such as backfill hours of work if you get paid for 24 hours, like fire responders who work 24-hour shifts and want to be paid for every hour they're deployed instead of those worked? How are those issues handled?
Well, during the negotiation process, when the requesting and assisting states, they should be talking and negotiating what will be included and authorized in the Rec A associated with that mission. In the case of backfill, it's not normally something that would be eligible. However, if during the negotiation process, the requesting state and the assisting state agree that backfill will be eligible, that should be detailed in writing in the Rec A, and that would make it eligible as a reimbursable item.
Okay, let's see. Are receipts necessary for per diem costs?
Per diem, if per diem is claimed, then the receipts would not be necessary, no.
All right, those are all the questions I have. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Jack, for giving us this presentation.